All right. Welcome to another Zoom. I've got a couple of things to mention before we introduce our special guest. We're going to have a chat with someone we've spoken to before, but not for a while. It'll be a good chat. But milestones for this weekend, you've got a couple. 50th game to Mark Cosned and 100th game to Chris Cummings, both fieldies. So well done to you guys. Just a note about 2 yellow cards. We had a couple of those situations last weekend. So when one player gets 2 yellow cards in the one game, this is the procedure. For the second yellow card, you show a red card and treat it like a normal red card. So the player can't return to the field. The team plays one player short for the next 10 minutes. Where some umpires get a bit mixed up is the administration afterwards. So it's not to be entered as a red card in Officials HQ. It's entered as 2 yellow cards, and there's an automatic 1-week suspension to any player that gets 2 yellow cards in one game. So just to make sure we pick up on that, normally I tell you not to write yellow or red cards in any other issues section, because otherwise you'd just be filling that section up. But in this case, when one player has 2 yellow cards, just make a note of that in any other issues so that we do apply the 1-week suspension. So yeah, just some of us a bit confused and going to add all the details into the red card section, not necessary. Just do it as outlined there. Important that umpires do not leave a mess in or outside the change rooms, especially when you've got muddy boots. So if you're like me on the weekend and wanted to clean my boots, I hit them together outside over dirt so that any dirt that came off went into the dirt. And then if you are going to do anything with them in the change rooms, just make sure you don't leave a mess. Yeah, we had a photo sent from a club that weren't too happy, and fair enough too, with some marks on the walls. Just be a bit smart about it. And I worked out who it was, and he apologised and made sure he won't do it again. But yeah, just all of us need to be a bit aware about the mess that we leave afterwards. It doesn't have to be about muddy boots as well. Just have a look at the change rooms when you leave and make sure they're left in good condition. And final thing I just want to mention, it's really more towards the goal umpires. The goal umpires we're using for for all the grades, our goal umpires are doing using the Sportal app to keep the scores. We're no longer having to use that. So both goal umpires can go back to just keeping score on the traditional scorecards from now on. And I'll just put that in the coaching notes more for the goal umpires. Okay, is there anyone want to raise anything from the weekend or make mention of anything I just said then? There's a chance. No. All right. Tony, if you could unmute yourself. I did see you're online. So Tony Roach, we have chatted to him in the past. Tony, a bit of a legend of the Adelaide Footy League, involved in as a player and a coach for many years. Many of you will know him. In recent times, he's been involved in the tribunal. I can't see him unmuting himself. So Tony, you're going to have to, he's a bit IT challenged. You'll need to press the unmute button on your...
There it is.
There you got it.
There you go. Not that bad. I recognise a little microphone down in the bottom left. I've done a few of these now.
I thought we were going to have a very, very short Zoom for a bit. Thanks for joining us. I reckon last time you chatted was probably in person maybe, but I know you've spoken to us a couple of times in the last few years. Welcome. And
Thank you.
I thought we have in the past concentrated a lot on the tribunal. We will talk about that. But I actually want to find out a little bit about your journey, and you can give us an insight to your different involvements with the Adelaide Footy League.
Yeah, sure. I became involved with the Adelaide Football League in 1985. was my first year involved. I came out of league footy after '84 and took a playing coaching job with the Pulteney Old Scholars Football Club. They were in Division 2 at that particular time. And a few guys that I played footy with at North Adelaide were playing there. So they sort of convinced me after quite a few drinks at a nice restaurant one night that that'd be a good place for me to coach. So anyway, I went there and look, I really enjoyed the experience of coaching an old scholars club. It was probably a good thing coming out of sort of serious footy like league footy and then going to something like that, because football itself was ranked about 20th on their priority list, which I found out about when finals came. So we finished that year, 1985, sitting top with a double chance, and 9 of my A-grade players told me that they were unavailable for the next couple of weeks because they were going snow skiing. So when you take 9 out of your A-grade side, you tend to lose the second semi and then the preliminary, because in those days, obviously, Division 2, the first and second semi were played on the same day. It was a Final Four. So we subsequently lost the second semi and then lost the preliminary final. So all the guys who were coming back for the grand final, we didn't make it. So we weren't promoted, and I was approached by Broadview, who were in Division 1, to go there that next year. So then I went to Broadview in '86.
Hey, Tony, before
Yeah.
you go into that, I'm actually interested, just cover off what you did at SANFL level. You said you came from North Adelaide.
Came from North Adelaide. Played my first league game in 1975. I was 17, and by the time I reached the age of 20, I'd had 6 operations, 3 on each knee. Nothing in terms of ACLs or anything like that, just wear and tear stuff. So I ended up having an operation that I've now found out, talking to a few physios, that was the worst operation ever done because it didn't work. It was called a lateral release, whereby they cut the tendons in your knees to make your kneecap float. So I had roughening behind both kneecaps. So they decided that it was a good idea to scrape away the membrane that sits under your kneecap, because then that'll work. Well, it just got worse. Then it was time to do a lateral release on each knee, and basically your knee cap just floats, and so you really have to train yourself to do a lot of things. Even today, when I go downstairs, I've got to concentrate because your kneecap locks in for you to go up and downstairs. So by the time I turned 25, I was done. My knees were so sore. I had 3 coaches. I had Mike Patterson for a few years, and then he left, and I was lucky enough to be coached and played with Barry Robran. So that was always good. People say, "Oh, you played with Robran." Well, I played with Robran after he got hurt. So he got hurt in a state game in '74, and he still did some special things, but it took him 5 years, I think it was, to play 12 games to get to 200. And then after that, I had Mick Noonan. I had him for a few years before I got out of it. But basically, my Sunday mornings, because back in those days, we really played Saturday afternoons. Very rarely did we play anything apart from Saturday afternoons. My Sunday morning was going to see a surgeon called Greg Keane, who's recently retired, I think, Greg. And he would take out 3 or 4 syringes out of both knees, just get all the gunk out of both knees. And that was my Sunday morning. I didn't train Tuesdays, and then I'd train Thursdays and then play Saturdays and then go back in and have all this stuff pulled out of my knees. So at 26, it was time to go and play local footy. And I only lasted 3 years playing in amateur league footy, because the knee soreness doesn't go away just because you're playing a different level of footy.
How many league games did you manage at North Adelaide?
I ended up playing 100 on the knocker. So North Adelaide, when I gave it away, I'd played, which was a good thing, because in those days, if you actually got injured when you were playing league footy, you got half match payments, which was a good 89 injured games I had at North Adelaide.
Wow.
So a few seasons worth of not playing at all. because of, yeah, my knees.
They were big days for Sanford footy. It was huge crowds, weren't they?
Massive crowds. Yeah. Yeah. I can remember playing one game against Norwood in the pouring rain at Prospect Oval. It was absolutely pouring with rain, and there was something like 12,000 people at Prospect Oval. It was just ridiculous. But yeah, they were just big crowds. Yeah, all the time.
And back in those days, things were pretty rough, and we'll get onto that in amateur league ranks as well. But you would have played alongside Dave Granger?
I did play against Dave Granger. I can remember Dave Granger taking one of the best marks I've ever seen at Alberton Oval, and he took it on David Wildy, who's played at North and does a lot on SEN now, I think. Dave's been commentating footy for years. He took one of the best marks on David Wildy's head you would ever see, and then turned around and threw the ball in Wildy's face. So the umpire just reversed the free kick. He just gave Wildy the free kick. He was scary. He was scary because you basically didn't know. You knew what was happening in those days. You just had to look everywhere because if you were set up and you were run through and whatever, that was regarded as a part of the game. So a lot of backhanders and things like that. I can remember my first league game was against West Adelaide at Footy Park, and Patterson said to me, "You're standing Bob Loveday. He's an old man. Just run him. Just run," which I did in the first quarter. I started off really well, and then at quarter time, he just hauled off and just punched me fair and square in the face, and just said, "You need to slow down." But within 5 seconds of him doing that, he was on the ground. Do you know every club had protectors? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everybody had one. And in those days, North Adelaide had a guy called George McGuinness, who was a big, strong, powerful man, and he was a protector. Another guy, Charlie Payne, came out of VFL for Essendon, and he was a protector. So you were protected to a certain extent, especially when you first started. You sort of felt a bit safe.
And Mickey Noonan was an interesting character, pretty hard man. How did you find playing with him?
Yeah, look, he was totally different. You go back to Patterson. Patterson would strap himself in or wrap himself in glad wrap and put tracksuits on and go for a run, and it's 38 degrees. And because that's how you lost weight. That was the theory back then. And, if you had a drink, you were considered weak pre-season. So there were all those sort of things. When Noonan came in, because Noonan was had a PE teacher background and was into the heart rate monitors, early days of that. I remember the first training session he had. It was at Prospect Oval. He'd played with us the year before. So he was at Norwood, and he was only at Norwood for a year, and then he came to North Adelaide. And the first training session he had with us as coach, it was about 38 degrees, and we all thought, "Oh, here we go. This is, one of these nights where you just try and survive." And he said, "Right, fellas, if you're not feeling well during training tonight, I want you to go and sit in the shade of the grandstand, and there's water bottles over there, and you can drink as much as you like." And everyone thought he was taking the piss. Everyone thought, "Oh, who's going to be the first idiot to do it?" And it probably took us a good few weeks to actually work out that he was deadly serious. He understood, you needed to be hydrated, and he was really changed things in terms of that. The other thing that he did that we learned pretty quickly, that the dynamics of footy had changed a little bit, is he cancelled Sunday morning training. We didn't train on a Sunday morning anyway. And Sunday morning basically was run a few laps, run the stiffness out, go into the club, eat the food that was left over from the Saturday night meals the night before. We were sponsored by Shadow Yaldara. So across the road was a North Adelaide house where guys like Peter Cloak and those sort of guys did. So we used to always have chicken and champagne lunches over there. So that's what we did. So we thought, oh, well, no training. Geez, we can start the chicken and champagne lunches a bit earlier. And training was on Monday night. Well, training on Monday night became a fully fledged training on Monday night. We trained. And the other thing that happened on a Monday night is Noonan was very much into everyone had a role to play. And all our games, the club must have paid for all of our games to be filmed, because in those days it was only a couple of games, match of the round and one other, that they would actually film games to put on TV. And so we used to sit there on a Monday night and he would go through the structures and have the vision. He would spend hours cutting vision to say, right, Roachie, where are you supposed to be on a boundary throw? As a rover, where are you supposed to be standing? And I'd say, I'm at the right-hand shoulder of the ruckman. He'd say, exactly right, that's where now let's see where you are. And he'd freeze it. And it just became one of those nights where you just learnt where you needed to stand. And it took him a few years, but he was very, very good. I got on really well with him.
Sounds like he was well ahead of his time.
Way ahead of his time. He was a Jack Odie clone, though. I can remember him saying to us, no job, no play. If you weren't employed, you didn't play. If you had a tattoo, serious, you didn't play. Then a little bloke came along called Tony Antrobus. And Tony Antrobus had a tattoo on each arm. And if you actually have a look, in his first year, Tony Antrobus played in a long sleeve Guernsey. That's the only reason why he played in a long sleeve Guernsey, because there was this no tattoo policy. And apparently they reckon Jack Odie was very similar. Jack Odie had rules for everybody except his special players. So everyone had to play the right way except for Michael Graham, where Noonan was similar. Everyone had to do the right thing except for these guys. So I was lucky in my era that I played with guys that played in 71, 72, like Robrin and Barry Stringer and all these guys, David Marsh. But I also played with the guys that went on to play when North were really strong again, like Andrew Jarman and Clisby and Wildy, and they're all young kids as I was finishing up. So it was good to sort of transcend. And when I went to a past players function last week, so I can talk to the Johnny Robinsons of this world, who are now 75, and I can talk to the Andrew Jarmans and the Wildies and these guys, because they were 16, 17 as I was finishing up.
Yeah.
We played in the era where we weren't any good. We weren't that good. So my first year in 75, we played finals. And then I think my last year we played finals, and in between we didn't play any. So
in the rebuilding phase. So
yeah.
So let's move on to Adelaide Footy League. You were mentioning you went to coach Broadview Divi 1.
Yeah, Coach Broadview in Division 1. I was really lucky there. Bob Loveday actually coached them the year before I got there. And a lot of guys left. A lot of guys went to Greenacres. Guys like Aestrope and Dorsick and Buzzbridge and all these blokes went to, whether that's because I got appointed coach of Broadview, I don't know. But anyway, they left. So there was a real hole for some kids to play. And I was lucky because the year before, Broadview in 1985 won the under-18 premiership. And so there were a group of kids that came out of that team, Paul and Mark Kemp, Barry Blank, Nigel Beneke. These guys went on to play 250 Division 1 games for Broadview. Like, they were really solid, really good footballers. Paul and Mark went on to play league footy. Peter Carrera was another one, played league footy at Port. So a lot of these guys were just good enough. So in 85, we got beaten by Uni in a first semi-final, because this was still Final Four stuff, by Uni in the first semi-final, and they went on to win the premiership. And then we played in a few grand finals in a row. Then we won 87, lost 88 by a point, won 89. Then in 90, we finished third. And then I went to Sturt for a year. I went because Stephen Trigg's a mate of mine, and he got appointed coach of Sturt. So I went to Sturt to help him out for a year, and then I just said to Steve after the first year, mate, what do we do? This place is a cock case. It was just terrible. So I had a year off after coaching Sturt. And David Tiller had been appointed coach at Broadview while I was at Sturt. And Tills and I are really good mates because we played together at North. Anyway, he was coaching, playing coach at Broadview. So when I finished coaching at Sturt and had that year off, I was approached to go and coach Kilburn, who were in Division 1. And Kilburn and Broadview in those days were just like Port Norwood. They just arch rivals. They hated each other. And so I went and coached Kilburn for 4 years against Broadview. And the first year that I coached Kilburn, we played in a grand final. Kilburn were a very, very good side, but they had a lot of individuals. You just had to try and get them to play as a team. We played Broadview in the grand final the first year, and Broadview beat us. We were unbeaten all year. And the grand final, it poured with rain, and we got beaten. And then the next 2 years, so that was 93. I coached Kilburn, and we got beaten in the grand final. Then 94, we won, and that was Kilburn's first ever Division 1 flag. They'd never won Division 1 before. So we had that reunion last Saturday. That was a good day. And then we won again in 95 against Broadview. And then 96 we got beaten in the preliminary final just. And then I got convinced to go back and play coach Broadview. So I left Kilburn and went back to Broadview for a couple of years, 96, and then Broadview won the premiership in 97, and then I gave footy away for a little while. So
how many flags do you end up with as a coach?
5.
Nice.
Yeah, 5. So
we'll get onto your tribunal involvement shortly, but I'm interested to hear from your perspective what amateur football or Adelaide Footy League football was like back in those days, because you hear stories about how tough it was and how it was pretty wild. Have some of those stories.
Yeah, you sort of when I first came out in 85, you were basically told every week, everyone knew who you were. And you were virtually told every week, welcome to the amateur league and all this sort of stuff. So I had my nose broken a couple of times in the first year. And then you just got used to it because the SANFL was pretty tough too. You know, you sort of, it was tough and whatever. So you got used to it because you sort of expected it. It was a horrible thing. You sort of expected it. But yeah, I think the biggest shock for me when I went up into coaching Division 1 Broadview the first time, Broadview played Riverside at Riverside. In those days, Riverside were a powerful footy club, powerful, strong football club. And they played like the Magpies. They were just tough. You know, you played Port Adelaide, Port Adelaide teams, you just knew you were going to be in for it all day. So this particular day, we played all day. I just got belted all day and just, you know, fights and whatever. And then I've gone to have a shower afterwards. Little did I know that you shared the showers with Riverside. So the two teams, there were no separate showers for the two teams. Riverside and Broadview showered in the same shower block. It was unbelievable.
How did that go down?
Yeah, but what I found back then though, you actually got to know the guys that you were playing against. There was always this, you know, especially back in that sort of early days in the 80s and whatever, the drink driving wasn't, you sort of tried to flaunt the rules a bit with that. You would always, I'd say to my players, you've got to go into the club and have at least one drink. That's just the way it is. That's the rule. And we used to do that just so you get to know the guys that you're playing against. And that, I did that all the way through. when I coached. I just asked the guys to go in. One drink, that's all you need to have, but you've got to show your face. Win, lose, or draw, you go in and you get to know the guys that you're playing against. I don't think it happens much nowadays.
A little bit, but not enough. Yeah, that's for sure. So the tribunal, tell us how that came about, you getting involved in as a commissioner.
Yeah, it got to the point where I'd stopped coaching, and then John Kernahan reached out to me to see if I'd be interested in just sitting as a commissioner, because at that time the tribunal was heavily weighted towards ex-umpires. So there were guys like Ron Stennett was the chairman at that time, and Ron umpired against me in SANFL footy. So I knew Ron quite well. He and I used to argue a lot. I was one of those that used to talk to the umpire all the time. I just couldn't help myself. I just had to keep them honest. And as much as guys like Desi Foster and Laurie Argent and Schofield and Bennett and those guys would just say to me, "Why don't you just shut the effing up and why don't you get a kick? You know, you're having a go at us." I just couldn't help myself. So anyway, there was a lot of ex-umpires on it, and they just wanted to bring in a few footballers, coaches, that type of thing, just to sort of balance it up a little bit. And I really enjoyed it. I really did. I think I gave a different perspective to, sitting on some of the, the way different people see things and whatever. And then Ron, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and was unwell. And then he sort of said to John Kernahan, "Why don't you approach Tony Roach to take over as chairman of it? You probably need someone that's a bit younger. Instead of appointing the next chairman of similar age to me, why don't you appoint someone that's 10 years younger?" And so that's how I became chairman of the thing. I really enjoy it.
Yeah. So you've really come along at a time when the league has made a stamp on on-field violence and umpire abuse, and it's just turned around totally, hasn't it?
Yeah, that was Ronnie Stennett was behind that, especially with the umpire abuse. Virtually everything doubled. What used to be one became, not that there's much out there that's two anymore, but one became two became four became six. They brought in 12 games and you're out of the league. Umpire abuse used to be one. Now if you walk out of there with less than four, and I think it's a good thing. I really do. Early days, I had to think about what we were doing, because how I played and what I did is totally different to what we were trying to implement. And I think it's great. I think the league's ethos that you turn up to play a game of footy, you should be able to go home that night. And if you get injured within, the laws of the game, you hurt yourself or whatever, trying to take a mark or whatever, so be it. But you shouldn't be hurt by someone going outside the rules. And that's basically what it is. And this duty of care, I think the players are starting to get it. I think they've really started to get it now. You get the occasional idiot, but, what do you do?
Yeah, well, the number of red cards or tribunal hearings we've had this year is dramatically decreased. So we've really had a big impact, and it's taken a while. But what's a funny story you've seen at the tribunal? What's the funniest thing off the top of your head that's happened?
I reckon the best one was, and I won't mention the club, but it was the last game of the year, and this particular club was on an amended affiliation agreement. So they'd had their issues. If any of their players got reported and got games, then those games were taken away from their premiership points. That's where they were at. So we get to the end of the year, and this particular team has avoided relegation by half a game, but one of their blokes has been reported. So he has to front the tribunal. So if he gets one game, they're relegated. So anyway, I'm chairing it this particular night, and they come in and they want to call the player that he supposedly had struck. And that was a last minute thing. And so I kicked them out of the room, and I said to the other commissioners, I think we could be set up here. We could be set up. This guy could have bought this bloke a keg, give him some beers. You know, the only way we're going to allow this is if he calls him as a witness. But I reckon we're being set up here. So they said, yeah, you're probably right, but, you know, let's see how we get on. So anyway, I said, right, if you want this guy to be your witness, you've got to say he is your witness. You want to call him as a witness? And he said, yep, I do. So anyway, we rang this bloke who he had hit, and we said to this guy, you know, so-and-so's been charged with striking you, etc. Can you tell us what happened? And this bloke straight away said, absolutely, yeah, the dirty bastard, he hit me in the mouth. I've still got a split lip. With that, the guy who was his advocate put his hands in his head. He's just shaking his head. And the bloke said, oh, it was worth a try. Mate, seriously. Another bloke we had came in, and he was a monstrous man. He had to duck to get in. This is back when we were he had to duck to get in. He was that big. Anyway, you're charged with intentionally striking, severe, this sort of stuff. How do you plead? Do you need to, this, because the umpires would know, do you need to listen to the umpires' evidence first, or do you want to plead? And this bloke said, no, I plead guilty. Yep, I belted him. And so they still have to go through their testimony, etc. And he said, well, he was annoying me. He just kept pushing me, and I kept warning him, if you keep doing it, I'm going to belt you. And he did it again, so I belted him. I looked down to see if he was still alive, and then I took myself off because the coach doesn't like us doing that sort of shit. So it just, some of them.
You have to give him credit for being honest.
The last one I'll tell you about was an under 18. I won't say the club, under 18s. These 3 under 18 lads. And we erred a bit. We thought we'd get all 3 of them in because all 3 of them were reported. We thought we'd get them in together, but they tended to play off each other a bit of bravado because the mate's in the room type of thing. And anyway, the umpire, he could still be umpiring now. Anyway, we talked about what went on and whatever, and there was umpire abuse and threatening language and all this sort of stuff. And this one of the 3 was this little fella, little skinny fella, but he was just a bit of bravado. And he says, I said to the umpire, so were you threatened by him? He said, no, I wasn't threatened by him at all. I said, so what did he say to you? He said, well, he said to me after the game, I'm going to take you out behind the cars and I'm going to F you up. And I said, so that didn't concern you at all? He said, no, not at all. Now, we knew what this umpire did for a job, but we never told these 3 under 18s that if this guy had gone out the back of him behind the car, it would have been different, because this guy was a Star Force officer. So I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. This guy was a starry. So it would have been quite funny if this young kid had invited him out behind the car. I know he would have finished off in a bit of strife. So we have some funny ones.
Yeah, nice. Hey, we are running out of time. This chat's flying by. I'll open it up for a question or 2, and if not, I'll ask you one more of mine. But if anyone wants to ask anything of Tony, feel free. Michael?
Yes, Tony. Michael Jeske here. I'm from the Clare Valley.
Yes,
you mentioned a few names. I played under Barry Stringer when he came back to Brinkworth.
Oh, did you? Right.
Yeah. Bill Loken. Did you play with Bill Loken?
I did play with Billy Loken. He was an outstanding footballer. He He was young, a lot younger than me, and I played with him for a year or two, and then I went into the amateur league, and he went on and played VFL for Fitzroy.
Yeah, well, he taught my both my children in Year 7 in Clare.
Right.
So yeah, Barry was the best footballer I've ever seen in the country. Then when Alan came back for a couple of years, that was an interesting couple of years with Alan. Peter Cloak, goal umpires up here in Northeastern, so he's been my goal umpire. I've been out in the middle, and then Mick Redden too. I've actually umpired up in Northern area, so Mick Redden's coaching at North Jamestown too. So I come across Mick a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
I saw Clokey last week at the past players. Is he still goal umpiring by the sound?
No, I don't think he is. No, there was a story. He got sacked as a goal umpire. He wasn't very good, apparently. Don't tell him that.
He did. It was funny. He did say the other day when we were there, he said, goal umpiring's harder than you think. That's what he said. So, yeah.
No, great story, Tony. Great.
Very good. Hey, Chris Lambert, I see you want to ask a question.
Yeah, Rochi. It was 98, not 97 too. We won the premiership, mate.
Was it 98, was it?
Yeah.
Right. There you go,
That's
mate.
right.
Oh, yeah. So this lad was one of my good footballers. He was a good player. And then he ended up coming out to Salisbury North with me too.
I heard he was a pretty handy player.
He could play.
Yeah.
Absolutely could play.
Hey, finish up on Rochi. Some advice for people for umpires that do front a tribunal. Give us a couple of quick tips before we wind up.
Just be confident and stick to your story.
Yeah.
Just that's one of the things that the tribunal members are very supportive. Any umpire that reports, basically, if you stay with what you saw and you're confident and you just stick with it, then you'll be supported 100%. I think when I first got involved years ago, I was on the edge of where it used to be the umpire was on trial, and we flipped it because umpires don't report just because to be spiteful and whatever. And I think that's where now we support the umpires in the tribunal. Don't come in being concerned that you're going to get grilled. Just say what you saw. Stick to it, stay strong on it, don't need to waver, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, no, it's a great tribunal. It's been fantastic working with it. All right, the Zoom is about to cut out. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been a great chat. I could have talked for double that time. And we do appreciate your support at the tribunal. And for those on the line that haven't heard your story before, I'm sure they found it extremely interesting. We heard some good stories too. So thanks again for coming on.
No worries. Thanks, guys.
All right. That's it, guys. We'll look forward to seeing you Wednesday night for training.